Welcome everyone. Today we are starting a new live streaming series for Off-World Live and our media production toolkit. And the first thing we're going to introduce to you within live streaming to and from Unreal Engine is the Spout solution for Unreal Engine. So today we're covering in-depth and comprehensive workflows with Spout to use Spout to send and also receive video textures for Unreal Engine. And so first of all, we're going to start with understanding what Spout is and what it's commonly used for. So if you haven't even heard of Spout before, and you might also be new to our kind of live streaming toolkit, Spout is a really neat solution which allows two or more graphics or media programs running on the same GPU to share the same video texture. This means that you don't have to re-encode the video in order to share it between different software. And what is good about Spout is that there is no latency. So there's no latency, compression, or CPU overhead. And because it's the same video texture that's being used by all the different software, there's really like no limitations to this. And currently, we're not experiencing any latency or compression. And so this is really, really useful, especially for those who want high quality and resolution, especially those who need lossless video feeds. And so what it's really used for particularly is for people and kind of productions that demand a visual quality that's really, really good, really, really high res, and also might have restrictions around like kind of synchronicity. And so you might want Spout for kind of better performance and better quality over an alternative called NDI. And so I've heard actually a lot of people who use NDI, primarily they're using NDI to stream to another computer within a network or to also stream with audio. Part of the problem with that is that a lot of people experience compression as well as kind of latency issues, as well as kind of audio to image synchronization issues. And so with Spout, there really isn't any of that, but the only downside is it's really limited to one kind of single GPU, and so we can't use it to share between machines. But however, today we're going to show you kind of different workflows where you can use Spout at kind of different points of production, and these are really, really common workflows for people who work with these kind of fields, within these fields. And so using Spout, you can send video between applications like Resolume, Mapper, TouchDesigner, or more. But primarily, we've been using that for a few common workflows. So the first one I'm going to introduce to you is around using Spout for broadcasting and live streaming. And so this tutorial came from possibly quite a while ago, looking at the UI and the design of the editor. But something that's really commonly used with Spout is that you can use Spout within OBS Studio. You can select a media source and stream that media source. So within, for example, here we have a media source of a talent, and very likely she's kind of filmed against a green background, and that green screen is then chroma keyed within OBS, and that media source is then sent to Unreal Engine via Spout. There are most likely our Spout plugin. So within Unreal here on the right side, you'll see it's probably quite pixelated. We have a talent and the video of this talent set against a virtual environment. And for broadcasting, for example, weather channels and stuff, this is a really common way to kind of stream to stream talent into a virtual environment. You can add kind of different graphics, for example, rain or sun rays to exactly like the Weather Channel. And with this, it's really about adding kind of animations, cinematics, fog to make this talent either pop more or to have more depth within the scene. So this is quite a fun way to play with real life footage with a person and kind of set that person against a virtual background. And again, this is most commonly used within the broadcasting industry. Secondly, we're also targeting a group of people who are working in kind of like the new media art industry, and particularly in, for example, interactive installations or VJs. And so projection mapping is also might also rely on Spout, where you use Spout to send video textures either from Resolume to Unreal Engine or from Unreal Engine to Resolume or MatMapper or 4V to create these really interesting kind of visuals that respond to different inputs. So I just got a kind of screenshot for this program because I thought this would give you kind of like more of a taste of what texture streaming could look like. So let's say here we've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We've got 8 kind of squares for people to kind of stream textures onto these kind of square blocks. So let's say in Unreal Engine, you've got some really amazing cinematics that you're going to send out to a program for projection mapping. That's quite a common workflow. Then you would then use potentially our capture, our OWL capture, and to kind of send textures via Spout to different programs like MatMapper, Resolume, VDMX could also be one to kind of create projection mapping visuals. And here there are like 8 blocks, let's say. But just think about all the possibilities you have when you can just stream lots of textures out with no latency, and they're all going to be in sync. So that's really, really useful. Another kind of inspiration off the back of this is thinking about new modes of production, media production. And so obviously, as a team, we've been really interested in how Spout could be used for virtual production. In this tutorial by Jasper, we've got the tutorials mostly looking at how to stream inner frustum to Unreal Engine, but just so we're looking at this kind of curved LED wall setup right now, we can easily kind of stream materials, kind of textures onto this LED wall, and then use this as basically as the backdrop of any kind of any virtual production setup here. Or you can also use this with NDisplay. And then next we've got VTubing and virtual studio streaming setup. I'm sure that some of you have been following our Wednesdays streams a lot, and you might have seen that last year we've been working on VTuber Studio. And so in this studio setup, although it looks quite like colorful and complex, behind these texts is simply just one avatar with a little mini TV setup, as well as a kind of background kind of screen display. And of course, you can use Spout in many ways, and one of the ways is to kind of stream your game view onto the back of the screen display, so that when people are watching your VTuber stream, they can also see what you're working in the background. And then, of course, it also requires to create a VTuber stream, you'll also need to kind of have a capture system to send send your game view out to platforms like Twitch or YouTube. And so that also might require using some Spout and send that to OBS um, and to stream from there. And of course, if you've been following the more recent tutorials, this is a really interesting stream. We were looking at ways we can stream different types of data as textures via Spout. So here we're using Media Pipe, and we're playing with kind of different face tracking tools. So for example, what if we kind of use our eyes positions or like use a blink to trigger certain movements and interactions in Unreal Engine, and how can we use this without any latency? So part of the kind of like research here is to look at different ways of streaming data for real-time interaction without any latency, and people who've been using XR Animator or kind of media pipe-based solutions have been experiencing massive latency or frame drops, frame rate kind of problems. Here, this is really interesting because for the sending has no latency at all, and you also don't need to create an OSC server, learn how to set up kind of OSC communication in Unreal, because all you need is the kind of media production toolkit that we have. And we're basically only sending textures between programs. So it's a very convenient way to really bake all that data you need onto textures and use that to stream. And I think this is a relatively lightweight thing to do. And of course, most importantly and finally, we have doing different types of creative media or kind of media interaction with TouchDesigner. And a couple of years ago, or I think it's around a couple of years ago, we have had the pleasure to host Function Store, who's given us such an amazing tutorial around using TouchDesigner to instance different blocks, to instance cubes, for example, and to then stream the cube's positions, scale, rotation, color into Unreal Engine. So as you can see here, there is kind of like this four-prong approach to texture streaming. There's position, color, scale, rotation, and then you can also see that in the texture, position, rotation, and scale are created as render targets, and they're receiving in Unreal Engine. So this is something that we're going to touch on today, probably not as advanced as that Function Store tutorial is going to be. We're going to create a really simplified version to just get our ideas going for how we could use TouchDesigner and Spout, or TouchDesigner as a sender, and using Spout to send different data. And so these are the kind of common workflows we've talked about just now: projection mapping, new media interaction with Notch, TouchDesigner, for example. We've got different kind of broadcasting major workflows and streaming talent into Unreal Engine, VTubing, which is streaming out of Unreal Engine to Twitch or YouTube, certain major platforms. You can also stream to Instagram, technically. And finally, streaming data as textures via Spout. So there is really no limit to this. It's really around what we want to do. I know that a lot of people started developing kind of NDI with stable diffusion, I believe. So that you can kind of communicate with stable diffusion and like sending video feeds like in and out. That's also a really common workflow. And so really for today, we're covering three major things, and these will kind of cover all the foundational concepts around spout sending and receiving. And we're also going to hopefully dive a little deeper around using TouchDesigner to send spout video feeds to and from Unreal Engine. And so without further ado, let's give it a go now. So the first thing we'll need to do really is to get set up with our installations. And so the first thing you'll need to go on is, of course, our website for Offworld Live, offworld.live/resources/download-center. Here we have two plugins that you'll need to download. First plugin is the Offworld Live-streaming Toolkit in Unreal Engine. So it's named here Media Production Toolkit. You need to find the corresponding Unreal version that works and the plugin version that you'll need, and simply click download here. You'll be guided to kind of either sign in or sign up. So just follow those guides and you'll be able to install easily. Secondly, we have the Spout plugin for OBS Studio. This is something we've created for OBS Studio to have that Spout capability. And so if you go click on this link, you will be kind of, you'll navigate to the Releases tab of the OBS Spout 2 plugin. What you need to do is simply click on this exe executable and it will install the plugin. Really, yeah, it's pretty simple there. I guess a little bit of a tip for if you were to download this as a zip file, all you need to do after you unzip the plugin is to place it within the plugins folder of your project. So I'm going to show you how I've done it for myself. So I believe my project currently is named, what is my project called? Project name. Maybe it's just test. Or media plane. So as an example, you'll have to unzip the downloaded folder to plugins to create a plugins folder and then simply paste it in over here. So all the kind of plugin content will be housed over here. And when you open up your project, you should see this icon and this drop down. This means that you've installed the plugin successfully. So next, we're going into the OBS world. I'm assuming you already have OBS Studio. It's a very, very common tool to have, but if you don't already, please download it and simply Google OBS Studio and download it. I'm just going to drag my OBS Studio over here because the first thing we'll need to do is to kind of imitate a workflow. So we're going to mirror the workflow for the talent instead of a person. I think I've got an image of a cute green screened cat over here. So I believe it's this one. Is there a cat? Yes, so there's a cat there. Do I see the cat anywhere? Maybe it's so I'm not sure what it is, but I've just created a new media source, and this will be an image. So I'm just going to kind of deselect this and add a new media source. Obviously, you can stream anything via Spout over here, including display capture, browser capture, window capture, so on and so forth. So a game capture could also work if you're playing a game and if you're streaming your game view. But let's say that we need an image right now, and I'll need to select my cat. Great, so the cat is over here. Place it over here in the left corner for now. The first thing we'll need to do after you've successfully installed the OBS plugin is to click on filters and add a spout filter. Now we have the spout OBS filter. This is a name that's automatically kind of done for you. This is now sending a video feed out, but we don't have a receiver yet. So in Unreal, I've created a blank level. There's absolutely nothing there. We're starting completely from scratch. We'll need to quickly add an Off-World Live tool, and within it, click on, I'm gonna save. I think my window isn't really working, so let me go back to here. I'm gonna hide this cat. And click on the Spout Receiver Manager. So as you can see here, there is 0 array element at the moment. So we need to add and create a new Spout receiver. And the first thing you'll see is that it is inactive, and it's also prompting for a render target. So the easiest way to create a render target is to click on create new assets and click on a render target here and save. Alternatively, you can choose existing kind of render target. So I've just created one that's called RT OBS, and it is currently active. So here's our cat over here. And then I guess one thing I forgot to do is to use OBS Studio to get that green screen chroma keyed. So now I'm going to do it and click and add a chroma color key. So I'm going to be keying the color green. I guess this is the closest I can go for now. So I've added a color key here. Can make it smoother. I think that's about it though. And these are just kind of like image manipulations that we can do to change color. Let's say we keep it as that. We now have a beautifully keyed cat that's streaming out. As you can see here, our cat is also chroma keyed now in Unreal Engine. And I'm just going to hide this. So now we have successfully received a render target. What if we want to display this on a plane? We'll need to create a basic plane under shapes. Go to plane or cube, however you like to show it. And under, I would create then a new material possibly. create a new material and just save it as cat OBS, possibly. In a new material, we will need to drag our render target to the space and link it in. So commonly, a lot of people like to use emissive for a kind of screen-like kind of emissive look, but you can also go for the unlit shading model for this texture to look as close to the kind of sending image without being affected by the world's lighting. So now we have a cat over here. And so to add the kind of, let me have a look. I'm gonna delete the spout filter and I'm gonna create a new spout filter now. And we're also going to this is, yep, so there we have our cats. So that's somewhere this is some way you can already very quickly create a material to display your receiver. So I'm gonna play with just some settings here. And obviously to create that kind of green screen, the green screen and a talent look, we'll need to use a masked material so that we're using the alpha channel as an opacity mask. And now we have a more kind of cat shape form in the scene, and we can start creating a scene based on this. So let's say we have a cat ear, we might need another plane that the cat is sleeping on. Then here we can also create beautiful shadows of the cat if we're aiming the kind of directionalizing properly. We can change the way the cat casts shadows. So this is one way to work with Spout. And of course, we'll need to figure out a way to send Spout textures back to OBS. So sorry, there's something weird with my display, but I'm going to click on the simple one is just viewport capture. We're going to stream basically this viewport capture into a texture target, and I will use the OBS one I've created, and now this will capture our viewport and send to OBS. So what do I do within OBS? Bit of mirroring here. with the plugin, you will have the Spout 2 capture. So here you already have access to all these kind of sender or receivers. And of course, we will also need to create a Spout Spout Sender Manager first. So I'm gonna hide this, create a Spout Sender Manager, and click on the same render target and click active. This then automatically generates a name for us to find within OBS. And as mentioned, we clicked on the Spout 2 capture to basically get a Spout sender. And now we can see this one, which is your view, which is our view in Unreal Engine. So now we're basically getting this, and then it's streamed to my OBS Studio. Great. Need to still make sure that realize I've got a few duplicates of the kind of spout filters in my OBS, so that might cause some confusion. I'm gonna just delete this filter and start again. Filter. Our cat is back. Nice. So then we can use the Spout 2 capture again to get our cat as a texture. So get our game view. So this one that I'm kind of dragging along now is our viewport game view from Unreal Engine. So I hope that's a clear way for you to think about sending in and out of Unreal Engine. Again, we've covered this workflow that's very suitable for kind of this classic talent view in Unreal. And we've also looked at ways to capture that and maybe stream that to different platforms. So finally, we're looking at something more advanced, for example, looking at our TouchDesigner workflow. And so the first thing we'll need to do is obviously go to TouchDesigner. And here I've kind of used a few steps that's very similar to what function store has done. But essentially what you can see here is me and my camera now. And I'm just overlaying my webcam textures on these instances of blocks. And I'm also using siphon spout out to send this out. And I can use Unreal to receive this spout out. So if I go to my receiver manager now, I can select TD siphon spout out, and I will get my texture over here. So it should really be animated. So it's because I turned it off. But here looks like really complicated geometry in Unreal, but is actually just a kind of like rendering texture from TouchDesigner. So this is really really interesting. I'm just going to have this as a side-by-side view. And so if we're looking just at TouchDesigner right now, something we can do is to think about how we can use TouchDesigner to stream data to, for example, Unreal Engine to create a Niagara system, or as mentioned, stream motion capture data to Unreal. So I think I'm just getting some flashes from TouchDesigner on my display. But regardless of how nice this looks at the moment, we can use information from TouchDesigner to really get interaction out of this, because as you can see, if I move around it, this is all just a plane and texture. Instead, what we can do in TouchDesigner is to kind of work around this. So I think it's now basically just looking at my OBS capture as my screen now. I'm gonna try to adjust it. Okay. So I'm going to start from scratch possibly, but let's say let's start from scratch. So in the function store stream, what's created originally was a kind of cube or a box. And so I'm going to do exactly the same. Create a box. Using this box, I want to create a geometry and start to do some instancing with it. So we're looking at activating instancing on geometry, and we'll use the instance op as the box. Actually, what I'm going to do is here, create geometry. So we'll get box easily. We'll be instancing this box, and we'll need some kind of information for it to create instances. So we need a translate op that has X, Y, and Z for it to instance. So what am I gonna do? I'm gonna do So here I've used a grid to generate where these boxes should lie in. So this is essentially a grid with lots of points where boxes can kind of be drawn on the intersections. And with this comes different channels that we can use this channel to drive the instance. So again, I'm going to delete everything. Start with box. Then go to geometry. Yes, do camera light, classic, camera light, and render. Render is at top. Render. Great. And now we will need to create a grid, which is a SOP grid, I believe. We can add noise already, of course. Add a noise. So we'll do kind of this kind of flowy movement, which is great. Maybe what we need is also the SOP to chop. This basically is showing us how on x-axis, y-axis, and z-axis where the kind of points are in terms of world position. And we want to use this information as ways we can kind of instance these cubes. So we're going to go with using this as our translate op, so getting their positions, and then tx, ty, tz. You can see this is already moving. And we see that currently a lot of things are kind of all stacked together. So all we need to do is make these, sorry, not here, make these boxes way smaller. So this is exactly what function store has done as well. They make them smaller like so, maybe even smaller. And we'll get some dots like this. With this in mind, we can then play with our camera position. Let's go with that for now. What we have here is each kind of box's position, X, Y, and Z. And these are things we can then create a texture out of simply by using chop to top. Of course, now we're seeing a very horizontal kind of texture. What we actually need is a data format of RGB because we have 3 channels. And we'll also need an image layout of a square. So we're combining all the sets together. Yeah, I believe it's definitely this. So now we have all the cubes forming a position texture that we can use Spout to send out. This is really, really fun. So Spout in TouchDesigner is called siphon spout out. And as you can see here, this is what the texture looks like. It's very colorful. So if I move TouchDesigner away, back into the Unreal scene, we've got this beautifully colorful texture. And obviously we don't know what to do with it just yet, but just you wait. I'm going to show you a few quick tips to use this with Niagara. Obviously, I don't think this will be a kind of conclusive tutorial, but more of an exploratory tutorial. So I'm going to show you some quick tips that you need to do if you need to use this texture to be, you need to sample this texture in Niagara and what we need to do. So first we need to create a new Niagara system. For the purpose of this tutorial, I'm just going to show you already what I've done because it's the simplest way to kind of walk through the function store tutorial and simplifying it really. So I've got some notes here that I'm going to have a look. So with a new Niagara system, I've chosen the fountain template as it's really one of the most simple ones. First, you need to go into the emitter's property, and here you will need to check three things. The first thing is to check that you are using your sim target is set to GPU compute sim. This is the only way it will really compile, otherwise there will be a lot of errors. And secondly, we'll need to check that we're using local space and our calculate bounds mode would be fixed. So here I've created a bounds of -2000 across the board for min and +2000 across the max as our fixed bounds for where we can work from. And so obviously I've also got interpolated spawning set, which is, I think, happening by default and requires persistent ID. So if you were to do something like streaming directly each cube's position, you'll need something like this, as you're instancing the same way TouchDesigner, as you'll have a reference of how TouchDesigner instances cubes, and you can use these individually and individually have IDs to these cubes. So remember to check that. Next, we're looking at particle emitter state. Currently, I have this set up, which is a self and infinite kind of life cycle. So it's a self life cycle mode, and it has a loop behavior of infinite. So it'll constantly loop, and it has this duration. I've also got a spawn rate that's quite high, around you can set it for however you want this to look really. Then I've created, I've initialized a particle, and I haven't really done anything here, but the next thing we'll need to do is to set particles to work, according to a parameter. So I've created this parameter called particle UV, which is a random range vector 2D variable. Here I've set the minimum and the maximum to be 0 and 1. So as so, I've clicked an add button and created particle UV that is a random range vector 2D. And then I've dragged this into the initialized particle to set initialized particle with this. I've also created a scratch module, and this is following one of the tutorials I'm going to show you over here. So let me find out what this tutorial is. Texture. I hope it's this one. So I'm just going to show you really quickly over here.
First, create a Niagara system after adding found necessary modules as shown in the created, slowly disappearing. See that the particles are located exactly as
So how this works is basically using a texture sample, and then using the information of the texture to spawn particles around it, and it also has the colors, also maps the colors to it. And how it's done is basically, again, we're back to Niagara, look using a scratch module. So I've added a scratch module. And in here, if I double click, it has an input map and a map get and output module. What I've done here is creating again a vector 2D variable, scale, and an add vector. We need the particle UV to be multiplied with the scale, and to make a position, and then we've used the add vector to add the kind of position, and set position that way. And once you're done with that, click apply, and you can then use this and apply this in your Niagara system. Then we have looking at particle state. I think for this I have disabled kill particles when lifetime has elapsed. And most interestingly and most importantly, I've used the particle update, I've used my sample texture. And this is where really the magic happens, where you can use your render targets freely. And just check, I think my render target is RT-OBS. I'm going to compile and save. As you can see here, what the particles look like is really determined by my render target sending from TouchDesigner, and from here we can access a lot more information. So this is just one way of kind of using your spout textures for Niagara particles, but I want to show you more interesting ways of doing that potentially. So I think what I'm going to do this time is to send kind of different kind of data as textures. I'm going to show you how quickly I could do that as well. So obviously we've got this, and then this is basically a position that we send as send out to TouchDesigner. We've also got other things we can send. So we can also send sorry, send video device in. And obviously it's got my camera on. But to also use NVIDIA's latest kind of body track system. Or face track is probably simplest at the moment. So drag in your top, and we'll have information like face, whether face is valid, the kind of UV box, so on and so forth. So I think I'm just going to go for that now. So if there's face, we do something. If there's no face, so I'm gonna do I think I'm going to select a few channels first, and potentially I'll really only need the maybe we can also have information like the width and height combined with whether it's valid or not. So I'm going to select 3 channels. So now we have just 1 channel. Just so I'm just selecting 1 channel, basically. I guess with 1 channel, you can send this to Unreal in many ways. I'm just going to go for an example of this, of chop 2. Top. So we have white for when it is for when it's valid, and an empty texture when it's not valid. And I'm gonna send this to Spout and Spout out again. Magical. And with this, I'm gonna stop running some things soon. It's got quite a few things going. I'll need the Receiver Manager. I'll need to select Siphon Spout Out, which is interesting. Oh yeah. So it's my render target is set as in comments. Sorry, chop 2. I'm only using data format R. That's fine. I only have 1 channel really. So it's red when it's valid and black when it's not valid in Unreal Engine. Sorry, like so. It's not really streaming in not using it, so we have it side by side for us to see how it works. Oops. So then, depending on what this texture is saying, I can then program really interesting things here. And I think maybe something we can do is look at how we can use kind of detect pixels to do some things. So I'm going to say, I'm actually going to do some quick searching to I'm going to look at different blueprints, and so I'm going to create actually an actor blueprint here, and just a new actor blueprint class that's really normal. And in the event graph, I think I'm going to look at texture. Look at what I can do with this texture. So for example, we can convert render target to texture to the array. So we basically have anything like sample. Render target to the array, create static texture. I think I won't be needing any of these. I do this texture now. We'll basically need to think of how to use a texture sample to drive different animations maybe, or its movement. So we can maybe do something like I've looked at this thing, which is maybe using line trace and then getting material and reading render target, UV, breaking linear color, and then print string. So we can probably get color like this in Unreal Engine quite quickly. So that's something we could try to do. Or we can also look at painting with render targets, which is something that I know that Niagara has got. So you can now you can draw materials directly with, to render targets. And this will be really useful for fluid simulation, so on and so forth. So these are just some ideas we're going to play with today, but for the purpose of our tutorial today, these are just some kind of like interesting breakout questions that we can have that we can continue. But again, thank you so much for watching this stream. I hope some of the tips and tricks have been useful. And thank you so much. Thank you so much for following our stream so far. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. See you soon.